We all know fires can happen at any time, but during October, Fire Prevention Month, we pay special attention. One of the hidden treasures of Bristol is the Bristol Firefighters Museum. It's a collection of firefighter history by Hap Barnes. And if you keep watching and you're a Bristol resident, you may qualify for a free smoke alarm. We'll talk about that later. The Bristol Firefighters Museum is truly a gift of love for the city. It's located on the second floor of the New England Carousel Museum. So this is Kathy Mitchell, who knows a lot about the Bristol Firefighters Museum, and it really has a lot of history going way back and some serious Bristol complications in fires, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We have photographs from back into the late 1800s up till the 1980s. And what's kind of interesting about the photographs is that sometimes when we have people come in, they'll look at a picture and say, is that Uncle John? And they'll look close and say, yes, that's Uncle John. You know, he worked from 1941 to 1961 at the Bristol Fire Department, and the different apparatus and how it advanced through the years from the horse-drawn to actual trucks, and the pictures are magnificent.
Do we know any of the major fires that are on this wall?
This particular one right here is a Union Street fire, which I personally remember, and that's from 1988. And how that started was they were renovating and they were using tar paper, and someone was grilling, and a spark came and that tar paper just went up, and thankfully, I mean, it displaced a lot of people, but no one got hurt.
Yeah, no, you can always replace buildings.
That's right, that's right.
A lot of great memorabilia on this wall with axes. I mean, this, if you had to say fire department, if you didn't have the truck, the axes and all of that really are some. Tell me about these hats if you can.
They're called parade hats, and when there was a parade, the firemen would use them with their dress-up uniforms. And of course, the hoses, you know, these were used for, they would be put in a lake for, and the water drained from the lake for a fire.
Come a long way.
Yes, it has.
And this was probably one of the first, I guess, longer distance hoses.
Yes, this is a water cannon that was on the back of a fire truck, and of course it moves every which way. Attach the hoses here, and on the other side of the museum is a fire cannon that was used in the New York Harbor on a boat. So again, the hose would be put in the water and hooked up and pumped through there from the actual Hudson River or wherever it happened to be.
I'll tell you one thing, Kathy, that strikes me about the museum is it really kind of gives you a history of how far we've come in fighting fires. Like, you know, this is the way it used to be. What is all of this?
This is actually from the early 19th century equipment that they use. Some was horse-drawn, some was, some of the pieces were steam, which they used coal or wood to fire up the steam engines. But this piece here is quite interesting. As you can see, it's a ladder. And if you look way up at the top, it's a hook. Now, back in the late 1800s, that was known as a hook and ladder.
Right. Well, we didn't have the big trucks with the sky cranes and the large ladders. So, I mean, I always wondered where that term came from.
What they did actually with this ladder and hook is they would sit on the edge of a windowsill, as depicted in this picture, and they would hook that hook onto the second story and climb up. And then again, unhook it, go to the third floor, and that was their hook and ladder back in the late 1800s. You
know, it's dangerous to fight fires now with all the modern equipment. You can only imagine if somebody had to, you know, hang out of a window to fight a fire. Exactly. You'd have to have pretty good courage.
Exactly, exactly.
You know, Kathy, I think this says everything in a nutshell, the evolution of kind of how far we've come, this display of all the different trucks.
You have your old-fashioned from the late 1800s right up to, I'm going to say in the 80s, 90s, 2000. I mean, they're a little more modern than this particular one, but it gives a good history of the fire
Right.
trucks.
The interesting thing with all this technology, it's still the basics, like smoke alarms, that still prevent fires. Let's talk about how you might be able to get a free smoke alarm if you're a Bristol resident. From the past to the future, Bristol firefighters answered the call last year almost 2,400 times and fought 256 fires. The best way to battle a fire is to prevent it. Each October, fire crews routinely make the rounds to our schools, giving tours and tips on how to prevent fires. This year it's even better because Bristol has received a federal grant to give and install smoke and CO2 alarms to qualifying Bristol residents. Well, I think everybody since their school days knows that October is Fire Prevention Month, and I'm here with Bristol Fire Chief Jay Kolakowski, and even though we should be safe all year round, we kind of take time in October to make sure that we're safe. And this one's kind of special, isn't it, Chief? Because Bristol residents may be able to get a free smoke alarm.
That's true, Mark. We're about 6 months into a 2-year program that is funded by a FEMA grant that we received late last year that will possibly give up or at least 3 smoke detectors and CO detectors to residents of 1 and 2 family homes in the city of Bristol.
That sounds good. So how does somebody qualify for these smoke alarms?
The basic qualification is, like I said, a 1 and 2 family home within the city of Bristol. Most of them have to be built prior to 1986, and at 1986 is when the building code changed in the state of Connecticut to require hardwired smoke detectors in those homes.
Now, give us the process, because this is really unique, because the homeowner really calls, qualifies, and then your guys take over. So take us through that whole process.
It's as easy as it could possibly be. You do call our Fire Prevention Division and speak with our assistant Kim, and that number is 584-7964, extension number 4. You speak with her anywhere between the hours of 10 and 2 usually, and what she does is ask you a couple quick questions, make sure you qualify for the program, and then she gives that homeowners or tenants information to one of the local firehouses in the area, and they'll be contacted by that firehouse and set up an appointment for an installation.
Okay, so your crew gets to the house. What happens after that?
So once the appointment is established, that company comes out to their home and they introduce themselves to the homeowner. They go through the house a little bit. The company officer usually explains the whole process to them again, the program to them again. They have them sign a waiver or release it for the Bristol Fire Department. And then what they do is they do a little walk through the house and they establish where the best locations for the smoke detectors and CO detectors will be. While they're doing this, they also do a courtesy home safety check, not just for fire safety, but for general safety in the home too, and point out any good points that the people are following as far as fire safety, but also anything that might be deficient and they could correct very easily and make them safer.
All right, Justin, one of the things we go through is the kitchen, and we point out any obvious fire safety hazards we come across and just safety items in general. This thing catches my eye right away. It's over the burner, so you want to keep this far away from the stove.
Okay, something else we noticed, Justin, on our walkthrough, if you do use this as a wood-burning appliance, we want to make sure you keep your furniture at least 3 feet away and anything else combustible too. So like all of these things, we try and find a place for and move this out of the way somewhere too. Okay, while we're using this, not a safe place to keep it.
Now these are really advanced smoke and CO2 alarms. I mean, explain a little bit about where you would have just a plain smoke alarm converse to maybe a multiple smoke alarm.
Well, these smoke detectors themselves are more advanced than what we were used to when we first started seeing them in the business. As a matter of fact, when I first came on the department, it was very rare to see smoke detectors in houses. But all smoke detectors, including these, are good for 10 years. They have a 10-year life. The difference with these smoke detectors and CO detectors is that they have a 10-year battery life. So you might remember every year during Fire Prevention Month, and usually when we change the clocks again in the spring, we remind residents and homeowners to change the batteries in their smoke detectors. They won't have to do that with these detectors. The difference between the detectors, there's basically 3 different kinds. There's the ionization detector, which detects a fast-moving or flaring fire. There's a photoelectric detector that detects more of a smoldering type fire. And then there's, of course, the CO detector, which detects CO, which is a fairly common problem now that detectors have become more common in houses.
Is there any kind of time frame that we need to make sure that people get a hold of you to qualify and get these smoke alarms installed?
Mark, the sooner the better, really. There is no real time frame other than the length of the program itself, which will expire in about 9 months now,
Right.
or a year and a half. But the sooner the better, because the whole goal of this program is to educate people in 1 and 2 family homes and also to get them protected.
We really appreciate that you tuned in to Uniquely Bristol. I'm Mark Thomas. If you want to give us your comments, we'd love to hear from you. Give us an email at marketing@bristolct.gov. And if you want to know more about Bristol, log on to www.bristolallheart.com. And we really hope that you would follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Until next month, thanks so much. I'm Mark Thomas, and that's this edition of Uniquely Bristol.